And I was muted. Lots of technical fun today. Right before I went live once, and then I don't know what happened. Like, I go to YouTube to open up like my music playlist for the stuff that I play before stream, and it's not loading, and I'm freaking out. And then it's literally, YouTube is literally saying restart the device if you want this to work for some reason, even though my internet was working with absolutely everything else. But that aside, we are going to be doing we're doing episode 5 of Her Take, reacting with Pisco later tonight. He just got off stream. He's tired. He's lazy, obviously. And we'll get to it at some point. But for now, I'm going to be doing a debate review with, I almost said with Hutch. It's not with Hutch. It's with Socrates, but it's of Hutch. So let me drag him in. You're muted.
Hey, yo, what's up?
Woo, are we doing cameras? Do you want your camera on screen?
Yeah. I need to open my OBS.
So Kidnot set up my... Oh, I can hear me on your end. So mute the stream if something else is open. Kidnot set up my like mic and audio setup, and it sounds amazing now on like through OBS, because that was mostly what we refined all the sound through, just like using different filters and tools through OBS and some stuff you maybe download off GitHub. But the thing is that like we also mess with my Discord settings, and now no matter if I'm not speaking, it's so sensitive that it picks up my voice for some reason. So my thing will always be green even if I'm not speaking. So just heads up.
Okay, so I can put in my headphones if this is not working properly, because this is just my computer speakers should mute themselves through hearing you, but it might not work.
Okay.
So let me know if that's not working, and I'll put in some headphones.
Okay, I'm gonna test it, and if I can like hear myself back, and I'm not hearing myself back, then I think it should be okay. Okay.
If we're talking at the same time, it doesn't work as well. So like if I talk over you, like try to say something important.
Something important. I mean, in general, if we're talking.
Actually, well, did that feedback at all?
I heard a little bit, but in general, we're gonna have to try to avoid talking over each other anyway. So it should be fine.
We'll see. Okay.
All right, I'm trying to do a pop out, but I forgot how to do that. How do you even pop this thing out? I'm awesome at tech, by the way.
Right corner.
Right, there you go.
And then, yeah, you should be able to capture me. Crop it.
I hate that I also have to see myself in it. Like, there's no way to turn that off for some reason. Unless
yes,
I add, like, let me... Why are you live? What do you mean, why am I live? Somebody in my chat just asked me why I'm live. Let's see. / playful, got it. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try adding... It's like a window capture, right? I think I add a window capture. Let's see.
And then you just select that window of the pop out, and then you should be able to hold Alt and crop to just me.
Let's see. How do I know that it's going to be the pop out and not my whole Discord?
They should be titled differently, I think.
Okay, like live, and then there's announcements in Pawn Discord, so I guess that should be yeah. The live thing should be.
Yeah,
there we go. There we go. I got it.
Name of the channel, I think, usually.
Okay, I got it. Now we're cooking.
Oh, hell yeah. Chat, am I cooking?
And I'm making it smaller. Hold on.
Wow, she's cropping it. She's cropping it, chat.
See, I know what I'm doing sometimes. Every now and then. Let's see. I want to make it like
in the upper right corner. There's no, yeah.
Well, there's not, because there's not too much like chat activity. but then it'll be covered. So
yeah. That's perfect right there. That's perfect. Yeah.
In the bottom corner, it'll be fine once we pull it up. Okay. Yeah.
Just in the bottom right corner. That's perfect. Just cover whoever that is.
Okay. Let's see. This should be a direct timestamp to it. You disappeared. Why'd this happen?
What did you do?
I guess if I guess if I don't have you like open on the thing, it goes away. That's weird, but that's fine. I can do that as well.
Sometimes if you have a window in front that's totally covering it.
Yeah, it doesn't show it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's just a OBS thing. I don't know. It only happens sometimes also. Sometimes it's fine. But
okay, bizarre.
if you just don't have it maximized on top of Discord, then it should work.
Okay. Nope. So a few days ago, Hutch had this debate with a guy named, I think, Disinformation Tracker. He has a YouTube page, but he also has like I think he has a bigger presence on Twitter, and he just seems to like post drama clips from streamers. And he posted one of Hutch, and let me pull it up so we can set the stage for what even got them into this argument. Let me see. I know I sent it to you, Socrates, yesterday, so I'm going to pull it up from there.
I just realized I am going to need my headphones because you're going to need to stream the watch to me.
Yes, that might help if you could hear me.
Same time. Okay. BRB.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, while he gets that, where is the... Okay, here's the clip. So this is the clip in question. If it'll load.
Hospitals.
Does anybody dispute
Bombing hospitals is a war crime.
No, it's not.
Okay? Bombing hospitals is a war crime. In your conversation
To be clear, and I'm not saying all hospitals should be bombed, but there's no such thing as like a building that is exempt from bombing if it's a valid military target.
Gone back and forth on it, and you've called it a war or whatever. But having said that, in your conversation with Sam Cedar, you thought you had a gotcha.
I'm not sticking up for bombing every hospital. I'm saying if you set up shop in a hospital, you make that hospital a valid military target. It is not illegal by international law. Not something to be celebrated, but you can't disagree with me. You can just look it up.
How is that pro-Zionist?
The Gaza Strip.
This isn't something that's like, oh, I have an opinion.
Pro-Zionist. Would you like to explain that?
Do you think a bomb shelter would actually survive bunker buster bombs?
It'd be a lot safer than
There's not a standing structure remaining in
Why are you doing? Why are you doing, dude? Come on. Why are you doing, dude? Come on. Don't get mad at me. If you get mad at international law, why are you mad at me?
So I need you to stream that to the Discord so that I can see at the same time. And it's going to fuck up your window formatting?
No, it's not. It's going to be fine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, yeah, it will be. Fuck, because it's going to show this. How do I, like, close it so it doesn't show the participants? Hold on. There we go. Oh, my God. I thought it would actually fix it. Hold on. Well, I'll fix it in a little bit. Okay, but hold on. Can you... I'm playing the clip that led up to their debate.
Crosshairs. Can I please ask you a question?
Already saw.
Mad at me.
Again, me criticizing Hamas makes me a Zionist?
You criticizing Hamas makes you a Zionist?
That's what you're claiming.
I mean, it depends on it depends on what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, you know exactly what I said.
You can have criticisms of Hamas in terms of like their own internal domestic affairs, in terms of their governance. But if that's your hyper focus, then yes, people are going to make that inference that you are definitely against any kind of.
Okay, so that clip of him just, he's just talking about international law, I guess. Sent people into a tizzy. Wonder why. So he in his defense, and I'm gonna pull up his thing after I'm done fucking with this window capture for the millionth time. I thought I fixed this, and then regrettably forgot to tell me that I need to screen share and you need your headphones or whatever. So this is really your fault. Okay. So he says that he's just talking about international law, you guys, and somebody clipped it. It was going viral a little bit on Twitter. Viral means gets more than, I guess, a few thousand likes. It's not really viral, but you know what I mean. It was enough that it like got, okay, so it got 1K likes, and then it was getting shared around, and I wouldn't be surprised if other streamers reacted to it, so it feels like a lot very, very quickly. So he puts, let's unpack. To start, one thing I've observed in the last 10-ish years of covering politics that very oftentimes the people with a complete inability to see current events outside of an ideologically dogmatic binary are the ones who bark the loudest on social media. So he is included. Yeah, he's not wrong, but it's, where's the Zizek clip of where you think, yeah, you think you're above ideology and you're within it. So, welcome to
ideology at its purest.
Yeah, exactly. So welcome to liberalism. And what is it? I couldn't even find this. This account is probably gone. But Call of Duty streamer Hutch claims that bombing hospitals is not a war crime. It implies that some hospitals are valid military targets. Okay, he was meaning to imply that because it's true. It's technically true, right? And so he adds this. What I said, hospitals have... Narrator, this is not exactly what he said. Hospitals have protected status during conflicts and thus prohibited from being targeted. However, they can lose protected status if they are being used by a military to harm their enemy. This is what international law says. Here's the ICRC. I think this is the International Red Cross explaining this. And so here's the links.
Hospitals are especially protected under international humanitarian law because of the life-saving function that they have for the wounded and sick. This means that parties to conflicts cannot attack hospitals, and they cannot otherwise prevent them from performing their medical functions. That said, they can lose their protection if they are used outside of their humanitarian function to commit acts harmful to the enemy. This can be something like hiding able-bodied fighters or using them as a weapons depot. Now, the party has to do everything feasible to verify that it has lost its protected status. This means it has to do factual assessment before the attack on the basis of facts reasonably available to it. So the first thing when a hospital has lost its protected status is that a warning has to be given. And the purpose of such a warning is to allow those who misuse the hospital to stop the acts harmful to the enemy, or if they persist, to allow for the safe evacuation of patients and medical staff. Now, of course, evacuation isn't always feasible of patients in hospitals, and even less so, of course, in conflict situations. This does not mean there's a free license to attack. Under IHL, every attack is always subject to the principles of proportionality and precaution. This means that the party to the conflict has to do everything feasible in order to avoid or at least minimize harm to patients and medical staff. And under the principle of proportionality, the party has to ask itself, will the death, the injury, the destruction caused by this operation not be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage pursued? And when you picture a hospital in a fighting zone, it's most probable that the harm to healthcare services and delivery will not only be in the short term, but also in the medium and the long term. In a situation of conflict where the delivery of health service is all the more crucial because of the high number of wounded and sick.
Okay, so me personally, that was not this this 2-minute video of this woman basically spending 2 seconds on, yes, it's technically possible for it to lose its protected status, and then the other like minute and 30 seconds and 12 seconds or whatever like devoted to explaining, yes, that's technically true, but it doesn't release the party from adhering to the principle of distinction or protecting civilians or proportionality, like all of these other caveats. And he kind of leaves that out, and him trying to frame it as like, I was just saying what international law says, man. It's like, okay, there's any time that this is mentioned without bringing up that second half, it's not insane or irrational for people to get the impression that you are bringing that up to justify it or cast doubt that, especially in the context of what he was reacting to, which is the Hassan Ethan debate, where they're talking about Israel-Palestine, they're talking about Gaza. It's not crazy for people to think, so you're saying there's a case for some of these at least. But he says here, what I did not say, I co-sign each and every instance that Israel has bombed the hospital. I don't. Israel's asking the world to trust that every single one of their attacks is based on rock-solid evidence that Hamas operates wherever they're striking. This is a very, very tall order considering how much of Gaza is rubble at this point. So he's saying, I don't co-sign every single one, but you're at least saying you co-sign some of them, right? It's just you think that I'm sure they're going to have the evidence for some of them. But it's pretty obvious these days that there's a particular brand of aggressively anti-intellectual leftists that mentally cannot process the very concept of criticizing groups like Hamas and Hezbollah without being an unwavering supporter of everything Israel is doing. So I don't think it's also a good faith representation to say that they're mad that he's attacking Hamas, because it's like, I think they were upset that you pointed this out because it comes off like you're justifying you're either indifferent at best or justifying at worst bombing civilian areas like hospitals. So what that has to do with defending Hezbollah or Hamas or whatever is, I feel like, besides the point. But maybe somewhere in that account, which is now gone, they did that somewhere and he was upset about that, but he didn't mention that. So they see a clip of me literally just citing what international law says word for word. I already said my piece on that.
Citing a part of it. Yeah,
I'm just citing it word for word, a certain part of it, and jump to the most insane and wildly dishonest conclusions they could possibly come to. It's their standard playbook, and it's the reason these people are absolutely the worst at actual advocacy. So if you criticize Touch over that clip, you're probably bad at advocacy. You're probably ideologically captured, and you probably love Hamas and Hezbollah, naturally.
Yeah, this is where I don't disagree that there's like a really, really large proportion of the like pro-Palestine online left that does need to do a lot better, because it shouldn't be easy to catch you in gotchas. Like you shouldn't be making the kind of blanket statements that are leaving out important context that shows like some of the linkage, some of the logical steps between the conclusion you're coming to and where you're starting from. You shouldn't make it easy for these people. And at the same time, like this kind of like, oh fuck, like which bugs me more, the people who are, you know, basically coming to the right conclusion, that are looking at the facts on the ground and saying like, okay, well, in the instances that we're talking about, this is not justified, versus the people who are like, well, here's a very technical reading of like this portion of international law that says that this kind of thing hypothetically could happen. And you're like, okay, well, you know, if your advocacy is just like kind of berating people from outside,
well, that's not advocacy. That's
do better.
That's pedantry.
Exactly.
This is pedantry, and he's fine to do that. But I feel like you can't really get too upset. You got to be like, yeah, so what? Like, so what? I'm just citing international law. Fuck off. I think he's really mad about like the conclusions or whatever. But like, I don't think it's irrational or unreasonable, which these people definitely can be. I'm not disputing that. It's people on Twitter, obviously.
Sure.
That this is not this is a crazy implication to extrapolate from what he's saying. The other thing is like, you're just going off one clip. It's like, okay, this is the Spider-Man pointing meme. It's like, you're a streamer. We're all streamers here. We have all made assessments and judgments off of people based off of 2-minute clips. Okay, so like miss me with that. And the other thing, this is the third thing, is that since, I don't know if this had already happened, but so the Israeli embassy shooting happens. And Hassan says, I'm not saying it's a false flag. I'm just saying, he's like, I'm literally not saying it's a false flag, but I'm saying if it were, you could not have designed it better. And my understanding is the reason why he said that. And we can get into whether it's responsible or not. I happen to think it's not responsible to say things like that, even jokingly. But I did not think he was trying to do like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge type Pepe posting with that statement, because the day before, and I remember DMing this to you, Israel had open fired on diplomats in the West Bank that were trying to deliver aid or something like that, like a very, very similar situation. Then the very next day, this happens.
It's not even like Palestinian diplomats. These were like, I think some American diplomats, some like European diplomats.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he was saying, my understanding is that he was saying that in the context of discussing other things that had just occurred. Plus, the guy literally said free Palestine. So there was no ambiguity about what his motivations were, especially once like people saw the alleged statement that he wrote or left, the note that he left. It was unambiguous that was his motivation. It's obviously wrong, but he said that was irresponsible because just saying, I'm not saying it's a false flag and then doing but and like playing with that leads people to, you're leaving room for speculation and you're encouraging that even if you're trying to literally say the opposite. So I'm like, well, if you can understand that, you're kind of doing the I'm not saying it's justified but type comment. So he's I guess this disinfo guy at some point noticed this or talked about it or something like that. No, wait, I don't want this. And that is what they ended up discussing. So
yeah. And wait, before you go back to the clip, just when it comes to hospitals and proportionality and necessity, this is the part that I really almost never hear brought up, which is that my understanding of international law when it comes to targeting some kind of civilian infrastructure, something that could hurt civilians either in short term or as that clip was talking about on the medium and long term, you have to show not just that there's some plausible military target, but that there's a necessity to strike there. So it's a strategic gain. So like, I bomb this thing, this advances my position to win the war versus the number of civilian casualties. And that's kind of just like not even discussed almost ever when it comes to these scenarios. It's not a justification. Okay, sure, we killed some civilians, some sick people, some babies, but there were some Hamas fighters there. We did find some guns. You can't bomb a place and kill a bunch of civilians because there are 3 Hamas fighters and 7 AKs there. Like, that's not a strategically important thing that justifies that level of civilian killing. Right. It's not just that there's like, it's not a, you can't just co-locate 1% rule or whatever.
The 1% doctrine. You can't just co-locate some military related paraphernalia items. There can't just be, we suspect that there's communication. It would literally need to be, I'm not even saying like, oh, it needs to be Yahya Sinwar himself or something like that in there. It needs to be top operatives, or they're, like you're saying, a strategic advantage. And when, like, this was, I can't remember where this estimate was from, but Israel before October 7th said that there are approximately 30,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza. And that's, to me, like, that was a generous estimate. So that would be literally less than 1% of the population, because Gaza had, before October 7th, like 2.3 million people. So this idea that just a few militants, you don't know what rank, you don't know what hostilities are currently engaging in, would be like potentially getting one of those 30,000 people. And you had to bomb a whole hospital. You had to destroy critical civilian infrastructure and kill, babies, elderly, children, disabled people, to do it. It's this type of logic that got them thrown in front of the ICJ to defend themselves against the charge of genocide. This whole, we can just do it because there's Hamas there is not the standard that the UN or the ICJ is going to accept.
Because if you take their calculations and they say, well, we're willing to kill 100 civilians if there's one Hamas fighter. Okay, well, let's take that to their conclusion. If they want to kill every member of Hamas, what are they saying about how many civilians that they would kill? Is it literally everybody? Because if that's their calculus, then surely that's not like an acceptable scenario, right? Like they're
like even if you don't want to grant it's you're saying it's not a genocide. Even if you look at this as simply a war it's an armed conflict and this is an ongoing war in that conflict, then even by standard, even factoring in that it's asymmetrical warfare, urban warfare, guerrilla fighting, even factoring in all of that, that is still not a rational conclusion. And especially not, even if you could find a military expert or general that says that was critical and they've bombed every single hospital in Gaza, good luck selling it to the public. Yep. Good luck. So.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't consider the video of the Lebanon, the Israeli Patriot.
I don't care if you consider it one thing or another. If you show bloodied bodies, it's TOS.
No, okay, wait. This is what I keep trying to explain, and you keep ignoring it.
I'm not ignoring it. I saw your clip. I saw what you posted. You were such a slime bag.
Wait, just listen.
No, I want you to tell me right now. Like, why would you accuse me of not wanting to look at Palestinian kids that are injured? Why would I do that?
Okay, if you didn't know this, then I will accept that as an answer, okay? I will accept that as an answer. But let me tell you, it was weeks after the event. He was already recovered. His face was disfigured. He wasn't bleeding. He wasn't in the middle of having just been hit. He was just a kid who had a disfigured face long after the fact. And he was recounting the story of what happened to him. And
you ascribed, it offended you?
Yes, because you skip past his face.
Why do you think I did that?
Immediately start pontificating about how it's not really a terror attack because it's not as destructive as terror bombing. And for you to justify,
Why do you think I skipped that clip?
And now I'm trying to find this because I forgot that they also talk about this, but I'll keep it playing while I look for it.
Why do you think I skipped it?
Why does he think that the other guy thinks that he skipped it? I actually don't.
So I think I think he has a clip of him from his stream where I guess he was scrolling through Twitter or his timeline or looking at posts related to the Lebanon beeper attack from Israel, and there was an interview that came across his feed or something. It sounds like that was with somebody who is either a bystander or a direct victim of that attack. Mm-hmm. And Hutch skipped past it on his stream. And Hutch's defense is like he doesn't want to click videos like that because it could be TOS, because Twitch doesn't allow you, even if you're condemning it, even if it's for educational purposes, to show war footage. And I think Disinfo is saying, but it's not war footage because this was after the hostilities had ended. It was just an interview with somebody who had been maimed in the attack.
I think you skipped it because you didn't respect.
Sorry. I mean, if Hutch doesn't feel comfortable with showing that, then it's like, okay, sure, we can argue about that. But I don't know why he would be defensive, or he would be like, I don't even. He's making some kind of implication here, and I don't even know what he's trying to imply.
Hutch or Disinfo?
Hutch. I don't know what Hutch is trying to imply.
I think he feels like clips are taken out of his stream. Okay, here it is. So I'm going to pause it because I don't know if I can show it. But so this was posted on March 18th, 2025. Noah Sampson's criticism of genocide apologists like Ethan Klein angered many slop tubers. At Hutchinson skipped past the face of a child because it was graphic, as if burn victims violate TOS. He then justified the terror attack because it's better than terror bombing. So, let's see. If this is on Hutch's stream, I'm going to assume it was fine.
At her funeral, as well as other funerals with large crowds of people, Israel detonated more of these explosives.
This guy shows so much graphic stuff on his YouTube stuff.
International law. In Western liberal media, it was presented as a cool James Bond-style operation. It was described using words like ambitious, sophisticated, and daring.
The Israeli spy agent.
I don't know how to feel about the pager attack. Like, if you're on the one hand, it's kind of shocking, right? Like, I don't know if anything's ever been done like this before. Like, Israel went so far as to set up like a fake company. And they managed to get Hezbollah to purchase a bunch of pagers from this fake company. And on the one hand, it's like, whoa, Jesus, they detonated how many pagers at the same time? And on the other hand, it's like, well, if it's between that and like just a bunch of bombs, a bunch of rockets being dropped, like, what's the better option here?
Okay, and I think he is annoyed because that presumes that that's the dichotomy that exists. You either bomb or you do the pager attack, and there's nothing in between. But let me see if they clarify more.
That kid.
Why would you think that?
Want to let him, you would, because of the way you treated the clip. It was like nothing.
I do think that you probably can show burn victims as long as they're not active or like in critical condition. They're in a setting outside of a hospital or something like that, or they're bandaged and it's not war footage. I do think showing people that have been affected by these things is probably within TOS. But I get the sense, the only part of that really bothers me, I'm not going to try to read into and be super uncharitable that you don't want to bear witness to the trauma of children. I don't think it's that. I think
that's the implication that Hutch is trying to dodge, which I don't know what he could legitimately be worried about TOS. Like that's to me, it's reasonable. There's no reason for me to assume that it's anything more nefarious, even with the calculus of like the hospital comments or anything like that. There's no reason to assume that, but I would only focus on like the second half of like, I mean, would you rather have them bomb? Because there is something there that you could disagree with more substantively.
Thing to you.
Don't you think it's
get past his face?
Don't you think it's kind of fucking crazy to assume something that uncharitable? Like, you don't fucking know me.
It's not crazy.
You have no idea who I am.
To justify the terror attack.
You think that if I look at a kid who's been injured by a bomb, that's not going to emotionally affect me? You think that I don't feel bad for that kid? Why would you assume that?
I don't think so, because you immediately justified the terror attack. And I think that take the lead of people like Lonelybox or Destiny.
I mean, I don't. Again, I have no idea. I really don't know anything about Hutch. I hear his name a million times, but he's kind of like missing what the implication is I have no idea if that's like on purpose or not on purpose, whatever. But the implication is, well, you want to skip this thing that would emotionally compel you to feel some way about the situation, because you don't want to have to deal with those feelings that you're in some way maybe working counter like to those effects. That's the implication. He somehow got it backward. I don't know.
Oh my fucking
and so callous about whitewashing terror attacks, whitewashing Israeli violence, American violence.
Do you dream about Destiny? I'm serious. Do you dream about Destiny?
Okay.
No, I've talked to Destiny before, and he's a really pathetic
I'm sure that didn't go well.
Do you dream about him?
No.
You think about him constantly.
No, I mean the other day.
Why would you bring him
Wait,
up?
where did that come from?
What do
I don't know.
Destiny.
Okay, fine. Let's say Loner Box. Here's why. I don't believe that you critically examine these things yourself. I think you are parroting things you hear from other people.
Why would you think that?
I think that's why you had the confidence to just casually declare that this terror attack was justified or it wasn't terrorism.
Why would you think that?
Your knee-jerk reaction to to Hassan saying it's a war crime to bomb a hospital. Why is your knee-jerk reaction to say no, it's not?
This is not necessarily a war crime.
Yes, it is. No,
it's not necessarily a war crime.
No, it is a war crime. If you want to make a point about a hospital losing its protected status,
I did. That was my point. That was my point. That was my point. You just said a moment ago.
I agree with Disinfo, but he's not making the case very well. I think to people
talking past each other.
Yes, they're talking past each other. To people that do not understand your frame of reference for this whatsoever, it's not going to be immediately clear that that's a rational implication to draw from it. Because these are people that obviously take Israel's word or are willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that every hospital in Gaza must be bombed, or at the very least, some of them must be bombed, because they're thinking, well, they wouldn't bomb every single one, right? Because if you've already decided it's not a genocide, it's just a war, then you've kind of you've precluded yourself from even entertaining the idea that there is anything other than warfare going on, or retribution or anything like that. So you really are going to be taking some of it. You're willing to entertain some of it. But Disinfo needs to make that case clearer. And I think he should say, this is the impression that I get. What are you trying to do when you're saying things like that in conjunction with these clips?
I said no, it's not. The answer is not.
You just said a moment ago.
If you want to, it is a war crime. Now, if you want to make a point about a hospital losing its protected status,
I also think people should be careful with being extremely uncharitable, because this type of stuff splashes back on you, because you try to contextualize atrocities, or if you like the October 7th, this mass casualty event, this atrocity. If people don't like, pro-Palestine people, and I understand this, don't like the contextualization or historical understanding of the region and the events that lead up to October 7th being characterized as Hamas apologia or atrocity apologia, then I think you need to extend it to some people that their analysis of this, especially when it's usually impoverished or just ambient consumption of what they see on their timeline, which is already just going to show them what they mostly already agree with, then I think you need to be more charitable, especially on a one-on-one scenario, before jumping to conclusions, because that could easily splash back on you.
Yeah, and also, what I was saying, like if Hassan literally added, he said, you can't bomb a hospital, it's a war crime. Israel hasn't demonstrated that this hospital should lose its protected status. If he literally just said that, then what is Hutch going to say? Like now it's on him to demonstrate that. There's no easy gotcha there that I can see. Maybe he would find one, but it feels like just adding a little bit more logical step, a little bit more demonstration that you understand some of these nuances goes really, really far. And there are some people who do seem almost allergic to that, and I do think that's a problem, because it does create opportunities for these kinds of things.
So I'm not even annoyed that Disinfo wants to take that conclusion away from it, but when you're at the point that you're talking to the person and you can at least give them the chance to let them explain, you can either accept or reject their answer from there. No, I don't think it's what's the point. I think you can say that this is what I get, and it's not, I guess it's kind of a prove me wrong situation, but if Hutch has an answer to it, that it really is just analysis, it really is just my off the cuff reaction, it's not meant in this to be a furtherance of a secret goal to launder Israeli propaganda into my content, then that will be easy to demonstrate.
Yeah.
That is literally what I did. That is what I did.
No, first
you saw a 45-second clip.
That's not valid.
You saw a okay. You talk, and then I'm going to talk uninterrupted. So you talk. Finish your point.
Fine. I'll finish my point. This is what I'll say. when the subject is Israel wiping out hospitals all across Gaza, they raided Shifa, okay? They rounded up doctors and patients. I can show you photos of patients on crutches, bandaged, on oxygen masks, old men stripped down, blindfolded. They get marched off to these torture camps, okay? They get starved, beaten, raped, tortured, sometimes to death. They've tortured and raped doctors to death, okay? When you're dealing with a subject like that, you should not approach it in such a casual manner where you're providing this pretense like maybe what Israel is doing to the hospitals could be legal, maybe it's acceptable under certain interpretations of international law. You should come into the discussion with actual hard evidence, extensive evidence showing that these hospitals are really being used as Hamas compounds, control centers, headquarters, and that evidence doesn't exist. So why is it that your initial reaction to a totally valid, proper thing for Hassan to say, which is that it's a war crime to bomb a hospital, why is your initial reaction to that to say, no, it's not? No, it's not. Actually, sometimes it's legal. It's just absurd in this context.
Okay. I don't know what you mean by it's absurd in this context. The context of the conversation is about war, about like what international law says about
Again,
war.
disinfo is like, I agree with him that that's my gut reaction, my gut feeling when I see this type of shit. But then on a case-by-case basis, it's not charitable to do this. It's hard to demonstrate that point when it's like, there is clearly so much disagreement here that you're like 10 steps away and you're making all of these assumptions to a person that clearly doesn't even agree with you on some like critical base assumptions to get to that point. So it needs to be argued and reasoned first before saying to that. Or you need to make it clear, instead of the prescription of you shouldn't be doing this, you should be saying, if you do this, it gives this impression because people are coming at it from this.
Or you can look up Geneva, the articles 18 and 19 of the Geneva Convention.
You can have some real curiosity about like do you get that this is why people have this impression? Like maybe they should have jumped to that conclusion. Maybe that's not what you were doing. But you also have to be careful about that. I don't know. I really am torn on this when it comes to it is a little bit like nuance and case by case whether. I don't 100% agree with this. You shouldn't speak up unless you're going to provide all of the context in the world. You shouldn't call out one minor logical fallacy that might like imply some greater thing that's counter to something that's true. I don't know. I mean,
because it's so many words he's saying you should agree with me, but you need to make the case. You need to make the case because like disinfo obviously would not do that. But if your understanding is that it's a genocide, you feel that any if, ands, or buts or providing wiggle room or leeway to suggest or imply that some of these hospitals could be leveled for valid reasons when you already have the understanding this is intentional, that is not a bug, that is a feature, then you wouldn't even think to do that. But you're clearly speaking to somebody who is not on the same page as you, and you need to make the case why what you're doing, unintentionally or not, is furthering that. And it's more productive to make the case, here's why it's a genocide, instead of we're like working backwards pretty much. We're working backwards from a point of understanding.
And they describe
there's these two kind of sides of like, when it comes to lefties, like advocating in the space, there's the more, it feels reductive to say it this way, but the more emotive and the more logical or whatever, where there's people who are like, okay, there's people who are arguing in the right direction, there's people arguing in the wrong direction. If you're arguing in the wrong direction, I need to yell at you till you start arguing in the right direction, because you need to be on the right side of this issue. Versus the people who are like, okay, we need to legalistically, like a lawyer, make the best possible case for why this thing is a genocide and why all these things match up, and here's the evidence. And to some degree, we should be gatekeeping our own side when they're not accurately and in like a sophisticated, detailed, specific way making this case, because it does need to be airtight every time we talk about it. Like, and I have to say personally, I'm a little bit more on that latter side of things, because that's kind of how I interact with topics. That's how I like to interact with people in like a kind of empathetic, where are you coming from way, and a almost more legalistic, like, let me build the research case for why this is this thing, versus the people who are more like, you're arguing for this or against this, and let me try to badger you into arguing in the right direction, rather than saying like logically consistent necessarily things. Yeah,
it's like talking to somebody who is,
some people.
You have like a BLM activist talking to an All Lives Matter activist, and you don't like their framing or discussion of racial issues, and you're like, you just shouldn't say that, instead of convincing them, like, here's why you should not be embracing all lives matter over Black Lives Matter. I also don't blame people for, they see this clip, the hospital clip, or the clip that he says where he like justifies the pager attack, and rather than see it as an opportunity to debate somebody on the position itself, or even at least use the clip to bait the conversation, where then you have the more fleshed out conversation. It's like, oh no, you're still just as upset and angry as when you made the class, when you posted it to now, and you haven't thought about, how do I convince this person that my position is more correct than theirs? Because if you can get them to agree to that, then everything that you're requesting will naturally follow, because they'll have a change of perspective on it.
Act scenario. In that clip that you were reacting to, was not discussing any particular Israel strike. I was talking in a general sense about international law, because that's where the conversation went on the stream. You guys took a 45-second clip and took it wildly out of context. At no point even in that clip.
Well, he was being uncharitable with, again, this is what off-the-cuff reactions. Now we're just explaining the nature of content. So when Hassan says bombing hospitals is a war crime, I don't think it's charitable to think he means every single time. He's talking about in this particular conflict. And so Hutch is upset that Disinfo is doing the same thing that he did to Hassan that even spawned this clip, but
did I say
that will be lost in this conversation.
Destroy every hospital, but that didn't stop you slimy fucks from posting that clip with that caption of me saying Zionist COD streamer thinks that Israel was right to destroy every hospital. It's not what I said. If you were there in the chat that day,
and labeled it as,
it was a lie. And even after I clarified, you continue to lie about it.
No, I'm not. I haven't lied about anything. What I'm saying.
So why are you pressing?
Okay, now Hutch is saying it's a lie. Why does he think he's lying? I'm sure Disinfo genuinely feels this way. I don't think he's lying.
On this, if you know the context, why are you telling me that
this is just the first example? Obviously, Hutch is more trustworthy than Trump, but that's like saying Trump says this thing, and then somebody says, "Yeah, I don't believe him. I think this was his intention," and being like, "You're lying," because he corrected himself later and blah blah blah. It's like, well, just because they say that doesn't mean you have to believe it. You can follow it up with saying this was their explanation, but I'm not buying it.
Israel bombing hospitals.
And I was talking about general international law.
Hospitals. Then you should, if you're going to engage with the subject of Israel bombing hospitals.
Like again, the better thing. This info is like, you should know every single strike and stuff like that. The better thing would be then if you want to cite international law, cite the other portion of it, which is there still needs to be proportional, and it still needs to adhere to the principle of distinction, and they need to do every single thing possible to get civilians out. That is, to me, the immediate criticism of that clip is like, fine, you're not going to agree with me on anything else.
And it's on Israel to demonstrate to us, the people who are watching this thing happen, that there was some military necessity. You know, I understand that they don't want to release like a lot of military top secret info about how they're planning strikes and stuff, but it's like if they don't tell anybody publicly, if they don't tell the American military, if they don't tell like EU intelligence, if they don't demonstrate any of these things to anybody, why should we believe them? Like,
yeah, there's no reason to give them the benefit of the doubt. But that applies to any single state that is undertaking actions like this. It's not unique. It's not unique or specific to Israel. The other thing is that with the pager incident in particular, I think it was according to Axios, they didn't even tell the United States until just a few hours before it happened that they were planning on doing it. And then the Times of Israel reported that the reason why is because Israel actually had feared a leak, that the detonation of those booby-trapped pagers the information related to that operation had been compromised. So they just launched it almost not impulsively, but they sped up the launching of that operation. And they told the United States that it would be like an intelligence operation, or it was based on intelligence. They did not explain the details of the attack or what it would be. So it was a surprise. And the other thing is that a day before, the U.S. envoy from Biden's administration had just been in Lebanon trying to de-escalate tensions. And so this was literally the opposite direction that even their ally, the United States, wanted the conflict that exists now between Lebanon and Israel, that's the opposite direction they're trying to move the conflict in.
I was engaged in the subject of hospitals being bombed.
Is it a war crime or not? Not just cast doubt.
I was engaged in a conversation about hospitals being bombed. That was my conversation that I was having with my chat. It was not about Israel and any particular action they've taken.
Pushing back on you because
so what Disinfo could ask here he could ask, oh, okay, so like, what did you talk about when you talked about in detail with your chat about these strikes? Was that threshold met to remove the status from these hospitals?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're telling me that you talked with your chat in detail about this. What are the kind of conclusions you came to? What did you discuss? Like, again, I would treat when I'm talking to somebody, when I'm talking to somebody I am like friendly with or feel like is on the other side, I almost treat those conversations exactly the same. It's almost like a cross examination where I'm like, I want to find out what you believe. I want to get the facts out of you. And I feel personally like I would approach this really differently, where I'd be like, oh, okay, well, tell me then about that detail, because you're telling me you went into all these detail about these bombings. What did you uncover? Was that threshold met for any of these hospitals? What's an example of one? Right.
Socrates likes the Socratic method. Shocker.
Wow.
War crime was kind of this shock that you would say that. And
is it a war crime to
elaborate and qualify?
Is it a war crime to kill someone?
Depends on who you kill.
Exactly. Now congratulations. You've arrived at my point.
Okay,
there are particular contexts that shape the laws of war.
If I say it's a war crime for, let's say, Russia.
Exactly. And the context of this is that we're talking about Israel, Gaza, and we know that they've not been providing evidence for any of these strikes. That's the immediate rebuttal to that. We weren't even talking so generally that we didn't even know what Hassan was saying when he said bombing hospitals are war crimes. It's not like we're lost on, well, what conflict is he talking about? What parties? Like, it's not like we had zero details. Like, no, you knew what conflict this is, so.
To bomb a hospital.
Yeah, which century,
Ukrainian hospitals. Is your knee-jerk response going to be like, no, actually, it's not a war crime?
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes it's legal.
Yeah.
I don't think you have that kind of knee-jerk response.
I do.
To other scenarios, like, for instance, Russian aggression in Ukraine. I think that is your
I would have that response in any context.
Aggression in Gaza.
Why? Why do you think that is?
This is one of those, I mean, I guess you should give him the benefit of the doubt, but I find that implausible. I find that implausible that in light of a report that Russia has been bombing Ukrainian hospitals, to think that Hutch's knee-jerk defense would be, it's not always a war crime. Maybe Russia, in the context of a war of aggression on Ukraine, there could be reasons to bomb a hospital. I'm like, I really, really doubt it. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And there's a difference between making the logically consistent point that, well, there are circumstances in which that might not be a war crime, and saying, I give the benefit of the doubt. Those are very, very totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you keep demonstrating that that's how you react to Israeli terror attack in Lebanon, bombing of a hospital.
To what end? Because I believe what?
Because you keep whitewashing, obfuscating, muddying the waters. Maybe there's a gray area here. Maybe this is legal. Maybe it's not. Who's to say?
Why? Why do you think I
engage with? Here's a better question. Why don't you engage with the subject?
Why don't you answer that question? Why do you think I do that?
Hard condemnation. I
want to know what you think about me. Like, why do you think
crimes? Why don't you engage with the subject, delivering clear-cut condemnations of Israel's crimes?
I do.
Why is that so difficult?
I do all the fucking time.
Okay. So the terror attack in Lebanon.
See, but Disinfo doesn't just want condemnation. He wants him to accept that it's a genocide. So you should still be going back here. Because Disinfo's like, okay, but clearly that's not you're not satisfied by hearing that he'll condemn things here or there. You want him to disavow the entire thing. So you have to
come to a different conclusion.
Yeah, you want him to have a different, starting position or conclusion entirely. So it's not going to be enough that he does that or he does this. That's like, you're like talking to a Trump supporter and you're getting mad that they're praising Trump for saying a certain thing or for this other thing and saying, you never criticize Trump. And it's like, it's not, those aren't the better criticism is you shouldn't support Trump, not stop praising him or whatever. You should get at the root of it.
You condemn it?
That attack, I think, is, I don't know. What do you think would have been better? Do you think it would have been better to like bomb buildings?
So stupid.
Okay, now they get into it.
Do you think it's better to bomb a daycare or to nuke the daycare? The question's pointless. It doesn't matter.
I would say bombing a daycare would be better than nuking one.
I cannot believe Hutch is not realizing the point he's trying to make is that those are not it's a false dichotomy that you've presented to begin with.
But that has nothing to do with
That's like, so could you imagine if he's talking to some Hamas apologist and he's like, because I've heard him bring it up before that there was attempted beheadings on October 7th. There was an attempted beheading on October 7th of a Thai worker. Some Hamas militant filmed themselves with a garden hoe attempting to do this. They didn't completely do it, but they were attempting to do it. And could you imagine if disinfo or the Hamas, not disinfo, sorry, the Hamas apologist he was talking to was like, well, what? So what should he have done instead? Like cut his legs off or something like that? Shot him in the face? It is like, yeah, those are the only... I'd like him to not do that, period, is clearly what's getting at here. And no, I'd rather, to me, it's not between pagers or bombs or whatever. That's not what I'd be thinking.
Definition of terrorism. That's my point. It's pointless.
There's just this thing where it's like, there's so many people who, like, this is why I really don't like engaging with this, because, like, so there's someone in his chat, like, KekW, easy question, where it's like, if you take that in a vacuum, obviously it's better to do the less radius of destruction thing, right? So it's like there's people who are just not looking at it from the same angle as you, and the more that you keep trying to push in one direction that they aren't looking in that direction, the more what you're doing doesn't make any fucking sense to them.
Right.
So you need to address that directly and say, I don't think either of these, like, and you can say, like, well, obviously doing the less bad thing is less bad, but we shouldn't be asking these kinds of questions because these are both unacceptable, right? Should you kill 5 babies or one? You shouldn't kill any babies. Okay, right. One is obviously less bad, and there's people who are very just like literal brain about things. And they hear that and they're like, well, this is a really easy question. And this person is somehow not getting it. They seem crazy and I'm not going to listen to them. So you wipe out so much of the audience from listening to you when you engage that way, where you're like, obviously you shouldn't be killing any babies. That's the point I'm making.
It's like you mug somebody and then they're like, why did you mug that person? What, you wanted me to steal, like rob a bank? I mugged them so I don't rob a bank.
What's the definition of terror? What's the definition of terrorism? What's the definition? Hold on. What's the definition? What is the definition of terrorism? What is the definition of terrorism?
Targeting, I believe, civilians outside of the context of.
It's a completely. People don't really disagree on the definition. They disagree on the application.
Yeah.
Because the application is going to be highly political. It's not going to be really a rigorous application in every single instance. Because if that were the case, he would be more comfortable characterizing what Israel is up to as acts of terror at the very least. But we apply terrorism to non-state actors almost exclusively. So, of course, that's where he's coming from on this. So they're probably going to agree. Yes, it's when you are okay with civilian casualties, death, targeting them to bring about political outcomes. But, like, you're talking to somebody who thinks that Israel is genuinely engaged in defense against Hamas right now instead of terrorism to force the population of Gaza into compliance, if not to just outright target and ethnically cleanse them.
How does the pager attack qualify as a terrorism?
And to instill fear in the civilian population.
And this, because it's indiscriminate. Because it's a booby-trapped device that you are assuming was handed out exclusively to Hezbollah fighters. You don't know if it was handed out to diplomats, politicians, civilians, etc. for one.
And whoever's near them, you're not monitoring who's next to all these explosive devices when you detonate them.
That's the thing, is that, like, there's the issue with, you can't verify that it was exclusively placed or handed out to Hezbollah militants in the first place, or militants in the first place. And then from there, there's still additional laws of war that kick in. And it's like, okay, but are they actively engaging in hostilities at the time? And how can Israel know that? Because these are booby-trapped devices. They don't know the locations of them. They don't know where these people are, who they're surrounded by. And the descriptions that came out in light of this, it was civilians, like, it was like there was like a zombie attack, because all of a sudden those people died, their like faces and heads literally explode, like hundreds of people lost both eyeballs, like hands, had all of the burns. And that's why, because you're shocking the Lebanese public. The other thing that's an indictment is, if Israel's proving that, if you consider this to be a precise attack, okay, why don't they do this with Hamas? If they could be this precise, why isn't somebody attempting to give why didn't somebody attempt to give Hamas pagers to do this. You know, they said that they're doing bombing. So the thing that he's willing to say, the bombing is worse than the pagers, then we could turn back to the hostilities in Gaza. And it's like, well, why didn't somebody try to
doing bombings?
Why are they doing bombings? You just agreed that it has a higher blast radius and propensity to kill civilians. But honestly, I do find the strategic bombings and targetings and these things more justifiable than the pagers, because the pagers are going to be indiscriminate. Or I could justify rocket attacks. The rocket attacks, when you look at how many people they've killed or injured, it's not many. But they're indiscriminate because they don't know where they're going to land. But he would never say that the Hamas can launch, like, not just Hamas, that Palestinian militants could launch rockets. Where's Pisco? Pisco's coming later after this, probably like a couple of hours.
Times to get them to rise up against your political enemy.
How does the pager attack count as a terror attack then? Were they just randomly handing out pagers in Lebanon?
Firstly, you can't control who ends up with the pagers, but secondly...
No, you can't, but there was a specific...
He immediately got him on that. He was like, did they just randomly hand them out? And he says, no, but they don't know who got them. And then Hutch immediately pivoted from that. Look.
Terror attack then. Were they just randomly handing out pagers in Lebanon?
Firstly, you can't control who ends up with the pagers, but secondly...
No, you can't, but there was a specific...
No, you can't. Okay, well, let's move on to the second point. Then why say that? You know that they can't control... They can't guarantee that it's not ending up in the hands of civilians. It was lucky that they didn't.
Target there, you would agree, right?
Hutch.
I don't think
we're combatants.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true, bro.
What a combatant is? Do you understand what a combatant is?
You mean an active combatant, or what do you mean?
No, combatant is combatant. Okay, so if you have some sort of association with the IDF, let's say you serve.
I don't think there's such thing as an active combatant. There's either you're a combatant and the assumption is that you're active, or you're a reservist and you're off duty.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the term, I would have to look it up to see if international law makes this technical distinction. I know neither of these people probably know that, but I get the impression that when I hear combatant, that is somebody that's referring to somebody who is actively engaging in hostilities at the moment and in battle, as opposed to and the delineation wouldn't be non-combatant and combatant. It would be combatant, I guess, reservist or off duty, and then from there. But because obviously,
I mean, it's such a, like, if you follow some of these things to their logical conclusion. So like if Hamas bombed a bunch of people who are serving or have served in the IDF who might be called again to serve, then that would probably be widely called a terror attack. And people might say, well, it's unacceptable to target people who like are or have been in the IDF because everybody's required to serve in the IDF. But then when you look at like Palestinians or people in Gaza, they're like, well, it's okay to target everybody because so many people might be part of Hamas or have some connection to Hamas. So it's like you're somehow coming to the opposite
they actually
conclusion.
go back and forth, because usually the people that say that argue that there's mass human shielding going on. So that means the forcible conscription of civilians to protect military bases or areas that you're fighting from, or you're forcing them to fight for you.
Yeah,
and yet
every Israeli is forced conscription.
Right, and that still doesn't justify it, because like even on the hospital thing, you cannot target a militant that is being treated for injuries at a hospital.
Yep.
You can say that sucks, but that goes for all sides. Hamas can't target somebody who is they know for sure is in the IDF but is being treated or triaged in like a medical tent for some reason, and vice versa. So even then, it's like, yeah, then it gets to like, can you target somebody who's sleeping? No, you can't even do that.
In the IDF,
sleeping in their home, you know.
You're a reservist, you have some connection, or the Israeli government. We can add that in too. And you're walking around a grocery store in Tel Aviv, and somebody booby traps your phone to explode, and it kills your daughter. Okay, we would consider that
collateral damage. That's collateral damage. No, that's collateral damage.
I don't buy that.
There's
he
no
would
way.
Just call that collateral damage. That he would definitely call it terrorism. I don't know. I don't know him well enough to to
No,
say what he
collateral
would say, but
damage-
I'd be really surprised.
He would never be consistent with this definition. I highly, highly doubt it. And to collateral damage would insinuate that, again, there is precision, proportionality, and distinction being applied in the context of this attack, and that the opposing party is doing everything possible using intelligence and data to make rational and logical assessments that the collateral damage, so yes, civilian death, that's going to be incurred by a particular attack is outweighed by the military and strategic advantage of every single thing. But you can't do that with the booby trap device. You just can't.
Yeah.
And we would recognize this, I think, very, very clearly, because you're getting into territory where now everybody's complicit in Israel, if that's the case. Because, like, especially when we're talking about the loose definition of what constitutes terrorism. So Hezbollah has parliamentary representation in Lebanon. But my understanding is that their militia and their military activities are not sanctioned by the government. That is activity that they engage in extrajudicially. So from there, what do you count coordination? If I talk to somebody who's within Hezbollah, who has a pager at the time, who may or may not be asking me questions related to advancing military objectives unbeknownst to me, was I collaborating with Hezbollah? Am I now just... Is somebody who speaks to that person collateral damage, or the assumption, should you make the assumption they're coordinating with them? Any more than you should make the assumption that the police in Israel, that's a civilian role, if they coordinate with the IDF, does that make them a military target because now they're coordinating with a party to the armed conflict? They have guns, they have legal authority in Israel, they're helping the IDF with coordinates, strategies, positions, establishing perimeters, I'm sure all different things. Yep. But I don't think that they would be saying, well, police getting killed, that's just collateral damage, or actually they're combatants because they were sharing intelligence with them. It probably wouldn't be considered that way. Mm-hmm. Let alone, even that I'd be willing to grant. You could maybe make a case because it's more gray area, but it's still objectively a civilian role. Now we're talking about grocery stores, like public areas, marketplaces, like, dude.
Trapping a device,
just anybody who even is breathing the same air as somebody who's affiliated with Hezbollah is now being considered like you're coordinating with them.
Targeting a non-combatant in a civilian area.
No, you're not targeting a non-combatant.
You cannot control who ends up getting
that's collateral damage. They didn't target children with the terror attack.
That's not what collateral damage means.
Of course it is. What do you mean? What do you think collateral damage means?
Collateral damage is if you're striking a valid target and then there's damage to something else that you did not target. That's collateral damage.
Yes.
According to an unnamed,
we're talking about blowing up members of the government, random people.
According to an unnamed Hezbollah official, the attack took 1,500 Hezbollah fighters out of action due to injuries.
Okay, firstly, there were thousands of people targeted. Okay, thousands of people injured.
But that doesn't tell you much. I guess the assumption you're supposed to make is that they were actively engaging in fighters, but are they using fighters as shorthand for soldiers? Because we wouldn't make the assumption that somebody who's a soldier is necessarily engaged in hostilities. And that's what I do understand is the difficulty with there being precision around targeting Hezbollah militants, because they can move between hostilities and not engaging in hostilities fairly quickly, because a lot of these people, again, since I believe that their military actions are extrajudicial, not sanctioned by the government, it is possible that there is somebody who has a day job and then their night job is colluding and advancing these sorts of like this, engaging in militancy and hostilities. So I know that to be true. But this idea that, like, oh, well, they're fighters explains everything you need to know, to me, it doesn't. It barely gives me insight into anything else.
Secondly, I don't know the source of the specific thing you're...
I'm just looking at the Wikipedia article.
My point is, it doesn't matter if you call them a fighter or not. They're not in combat. They're
Look, to be honest with you, here...
Grocery stores. And you're killing children, you're maiming children. Do you understand?
To be honest with you...
Okay.
Can I just level with you? Can I level with you here?
Everyone serves in the military.
Can I level...
So by this logic, everyone in Israel is a valid target.
Can I level with you here? I honestly don't know what I think about the pager attack. I have mixed feelings about it. That might be the coward's way out, but I don't really have like a firm...
It didn't seem... I feel like his feelings are not quite as mixed, because the moments leading up to this have been plausible explanations, defenses, and justifications for why it was actually highly precise and okay. But now he's saying at the very end, well, actually, I don't really know.
Like, I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that...
So it's interesting. There's I feel like there's a lot of people who look at the situation and just say like, oh, well, it feels super unfair that there's lots of ways that Israel has to be careful in who they're targeting because Gaza has all these like civilians and stuff, and the military's kind of embedded.
Yeah,
it's like,
the nuclear power is actually at the disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways, because in Israel you have a like more powerful, like sophisticated state where you have a clear differentiation between military and civilian roles, and you have people who are currently serving and like active in the IDF, and you have people who are reservists, and you have people who are like military leaders, and you have people who are civilian leaders, and that makes it so that, oh, anybody who's like a civilian minister but coordinates with the military is presumably off limits from any kind of targeting by Hamas. But within Gaza, it's like, well, even if we say the civilians aren't part of Hamas, we can't target them. If you're literally just in Hamas, if you have any role, if you're like, head janitor in Hamas, you could be targeted, because the whole thing, the entire organization, everybody who's any official in any manner, anybody who's currently serving or was ever serving, is a valid target. The
Hamas run Gaza Ministry of Health, even though the Gaza Ministry of Health is a civilian organization. It's like, but if these people understand that Hamas is the de facto ruler, they're unpopular at that. And then on top of it, they don't only engage in militancy, they are the stewards of civic infrastructure in Gaza. So with that being the state of affairs, yes, people that are involved in Gaza in civilian capacities, whether you are in the health ministry, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if these are government roles within Gaza, you do have that is Hamas affiliation at that point. But you would never try to, or it's ridiculous to try to argue that fact and that alone could justify any and all actions, because you have these loose affiliations. You even being an official member of Hamas is still not enough. In the same way, you being an official member of the IDF is still not enough, because if there are contexts where you are officially active and you're activated, but if you're being treated at a hospital, like we said earlier, it's not legitimate for you to be attacked in that moment.
That they were targeting like random Lebanese civilians.
Maybe in the context of Israel wiping out villages.
No, they weren't targeting, but they were okay with random Lebanese civilians being killed
Across southern Lebanon, murdering thousands of Lebanese people, going on a terror bombing campaign. And they launched this pager attack, which is meant to assist
target Hezbollah. Target Hezbollah.
Genocidal campaign in Gaza, because
they were targeting Hezbollah.
Yeah, what Hezbollah, firstly, they were targeting non-combatants. Okay, but what Hezbollah did when after
I'm saying Israel Hezbollah fighters, Gaza, 1,500.
Why does he say he has mixed feelings on this, and then he's like, they're targeting Hezbollah, bro? When he already said to him, and he conceded on the point immediately, you have no way to know who actually got access to those pagers. It just so happened that it did work out, but that you can't actually be sure.
The magical like motivation. This is like the Sam Harris meme, where it's like, okay, even if Israelis kill way more Palestinians, they're intending to kill only the fighters and spare the civilians, versus even if Palestinians kill like relatively few Israelis, they're trying to kill all the Israelis. And so you could only look at motivation, you can never look at results. It's taking that way too far.
It's not even how it works. And like, again, you could make this case for rockets. The rockets are relatively primitive in most instances that they're launched. You know that they're probably not going to be able to be launched too far inwards into Israel proper. You know who's at the border. IDF people are stationed at the border, or the armistice line. So Hamas could not say, well, they can't go really far. We know it's probably going to hit IDF that's stationed near the armistice line, so it's not an issue, right? They would never accept that. They'd say, you have no way of you know that it's an indiscriminate thing. You can't make the distinction between civilians and whatnot. Even if you think you're making a reasonable assessment, which it is, because yes, it's more likely to be IDF people that are actively stationed there than civilians right near the armistice line. That is a reasonable assumption. That's not, international law only cares about, do you have the ability to discriminate that? Not, are you weighing the chances of it?
Hezbollah fighters taken out of.
A combatant is in combat. It's okay. All of Israel are IDF fighters, so everyone's a target then, except the miners. It doesn't make sense.
What the miners are about to become fighters, Israel,
right?
Right, yeah. Or like anybody between, they actively conscript anybody under the age of 40 but over the age of 18. You can be called up.
This is this is like the Destiny meme where he's like, okay, sure, you shouldn't call them children just because they're under 18, because somebody who's 15 could still carry a gun. And it's like, you understand what you're saying is that we're describing a place where things are so bad and these people are in such a rough spot that there's like child soldiers who are trying to resist a foreign occupation. Like, you understand that's worse, right? You understand it's worse that they're like, for the children to like want to defend their homeland and be in that situation. You understand that's worse.
Or if you've already said that they use human shields, then it's dubious that you have people that are underage, or like kids that are underage, engaging in this of their own free will and volition and absent any coercion. So by virtue of the fact that if I grant Hamas is conscripting child soldiers, well, that makes them valid targets. It's like, it would actually be the opposite. Those are people that you should be aiming to save by your logic, and help, not kill, or looking for excuses to kill.
You will gladly apply it to Lebanon.
Why? So why? Hold on. What, do you seriously think that when I was watching that particular clip and the image of the injured child came up on the screen and I went, oh, Jesus Christ, and I paused it and I skipped ahead a little bit. Do you seriously think, I really want you to answer this honestly, you seriously think it was because I was trying to dehumanize and delegitimize that injured child?
Okay, I didn't think that before that, but once he said you're killing civilians and you shrugged and said collateral damage, bro, now I think that. Now I get that impression more.
No, I think that it was because you didn't care. I think that you couldn't care less who that kid was, what he was going to say, what his story was. I think he didn't matter.
You can't, hold on. You can't even, wait, hold on a second. You can't, hold on a second.
The victims of Israeli terror.
Hold on a second. Yes, of course. This is like the second time I've seen you in my stream. All you know about me is from fucking Twitter clips, okay? If you ask my chat, Twitch, have I talked about
this is useless? Completely useless.
Not just in the context of the last 2 years, but in the context of the last several.
Yes, we know your chat's going to give you the answer you want. Good job.
Decades. Okay. Yeah. I talk
So
about.
So this is where, again, just me coming in, not having any further context for who these people are. I've never watched Hutch's stream. I don't know what he talks about. There's nothing that I'm looking at like definitively right now that shows me that what he's saying isn't entirely true, which is why I don't really like this line of questioning from Disinfo is his name. Is it's like when you don't give some benefit of the doubt, then there's no way to demonstrate to other people who just don't know. I am going to give some benefit of the doubt. Like, yeah, maybe he does talk about it all the time, and he it's very plausible.
No, you should just say,
shit, this might violate.
You just said that you're on the fence, and yet you think it's collateral damage, and you've effectively made the case for it. So at this point, I do think that you are leaning more. You don't seem as torn. You seem like you're leaning more in
those pieces. Yeah.
Right. I would connect that. I would be like, before there's a reason.
You get these little snippets on Twitter,
but now there is.
You think you can size me up?
It's like a okay, all right, fine.
This is a sticking point for Hutch. He just cannot believe that yes, most people will not watch somebody else's entire stream to get a vibe check before they make assessments of small clips that they say. Let's be real.
Then let's give an example of you downplaying atrocities. When you talk about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, all right, you keep insisting that Biden didn't play a role in that. That wasn't Biden's doing. This is entirely on Trump. It doesn't make sense.
Chad, is that true?
Gaza was wiped
Look at Twitch. Look at Twitch chat. Look at Twitch chat. Chat. Have I criticized Biden with respect to his Gaza policy?
No, I didn't ask about it. I didn't say that. I said ethnic cleansing. You keep saying the ethnic cleansing, that plan is Trump's plan, and you keep absolving Biden of his.
If you're saying that Biden's plan was a two-state fucking solution, bro.
Oh my God! Every single American president has argued for a two-state solution. Even Trump has said before now argued for a two-state solution. Obama, Bush, Reagan, Clinton, what's his name? Jimmy Carter, they have all said it should be a two-state solution. It's not a good answer to me.
Permanently ethnically cleansed.
We also just, this idea that like we don't have more info to go off of with Biden. Okay, it's all well and good. He says he favors a two-state solution, but one, on whose terms? That's the most important thing. And given the U.S.'s history, it's going to be on Israeli and American terms. It's not going to be on the terms of international law or Palestinians. And then two, they're not criticizing him for that. Biden is being criticized for aiding and abetting a genocide. Biden is being criticized for cutting blank checks to Israel with like little to no pushback or scrutiny or demands in return. That was the main criticism. It's not that.
Two-state solution by
Yeah,
giving
this is
billions of
kind of
dollars
a this is kind of an issue of, it's like, okay, is what this president is doing fundamentally different from previous presidents? Is what they're doing like way worse? No. But like, is what every president has been doing
Good to begin with?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not like Biden took a massive hard right turn, and there's definitely things that he was trying to push back against Netanyahu to some extent. So again, people have this kind of different perspective where they're like, well, Biden wasn't pushing to make things worse. He was pushing a little bit to try to make things not as bad as they could be. What we're saying is that we demand that he does like the right thing.
Right.
And that's why we're upset is because he's not doing the right thing, which is to take an actual hardline stance toward Israel and say like, hey, you guys gotta like not kill lots of civilians. You gotta follow international law. We have some leverage because we give you a shitload of money all the time. So like we have something to back up telling you to act better. And so there's things that you could do, and there's, it is important to have a little bit of nuance and recognize like, okay, maybe Biden's concerned about the election and he doesn't want to play into some kind of like anti-Semitism thing. Maybe he's concerned about Israel and the U.S. being allies and being able to influence them to be better in the long term. There's the affairs of state, but it's like, so there's different people looking at, there's like liberals who are looking at it as like, oh, we should try to influence Israel to be better. There's more centrist people who are like, think about American interests. Like Biden's not taking a hard right turn on. And then there's lefties who are like, you really got to do like the moral correct thing on this one. So it's like, depending on which one of those perspectives you have, that's going to basically determine how you see the situation.
The other thing is like, as Americans, we don't arm and fund Hamas. We arm and fund Israel. So we don't have any say over what Hamas does. I only have say over what my government does with respect towards Israel. So obviously the pressure on Biden is going to be reining in Israeli conduct and not, hey, Biden, like pressure Hamas more. It's like, well, the way that we pressure Hamas is via Israel. And so you only have a say over that. So that's what people focus on. It's completely rational.
Stop sending Hamas so many 2,000-pound bombs. It's like, well,
we don't do that. So, and the other thing is like,
they already don't do that.
I think that Biden is I think Biden actually did far less than any other president, with the exclusion of Trump. And that's not because Trump, I don't believe that Trump is an ideologically committed Zionist. I think that Trump is self-serving and self-interested. And so that leads itself to be thrown to the whims of whatever he's feeling that day. I do feel like there are times where things, especially military actions, have been greenlit, and he gave it the same scrutiny he would a fucking McDonald's menu. So, which is to say almost none. So that's dangerous in and of itself. But Biden truly seemed to me the only the moderation attempt was not actually with a change in how he treated Israel. It was that he exclusively moderated his rhetoric because he was seeing polling that suggested that not only the Democratic base, but independents, Republicans, and all Americans were having a more and more negative view towards Israel, towards Israeli actions in Gaza, and with the U.S.'s position with respect to them. So the only thing that they changed is saying we're working day and night for a ceasefire instead of saying we're doing everything we can to support Israel, because right now that wasn't popular to say. Yeah. But I didn't really materially see the difference that you would expect with conjunction in that shift in rhetoric. I saw the shift in rhetoric, but I didn't see the second part of that, which is the actual material change.
So he had like the pause on 2,000-pound bombs that Trump removed. And there was like presumably a lot of calls to Netanyahu telling him to like fucking stop this shit. But yeah, there was really very little materially that we could see that he was doing. And again, the hypothetical of, oh, Biden wins the election, now he feels like he has a mandate to be more aggressive against what Israel's doing, now that he feels like he doesn't have to worry about pandering in different ways. We never got to see that, and so there's some world in which maybe he does something. But I mean, I don't know that there's ever been a time where he strongly came out against, you know, in his many decades.
No, they said the red line was Rafah, and then they invade Rafah, and then there are no more red lines. They dropped that immediately.
Yeah.
They pressured them with aid, and it is important to me, and it's a meaningful distinction, that if I can see that Netanyahu favors Trump, which he obviously did, then Biden, even though it's not nearly enough, this administration clearly gives them some sort of resistance and some headache that is meaningful because the head of state has a clear preference. They're not saying there's no difference between these two. He obviously preferred Trump, so that means that you can expect that worse would come from Trump. So that's rational, in my opinion. That's a rational. That in and of itself already makes the case for Biden over Trump or for Harris over Trump, because even Netanyahu has a preference, and you should not go with his preference. But that being said, we have far more leverage, and Biden was just unwilling and just did not seem to want to really use that leverage to exert pressure and force on Israel, which we've done. Everybody says, oh, there's the lobby and there's this and there's that. And it's like, no, because there have been other times where the U.S. has gone against the Israeli lobby and they have pressured them. The Iran nuclear deal, AIPAC dumped millions. Bibi Netanyahu comes to Congress to say you should not vote for the Iran nuclear deal. Well, Iran nuclear deal passed. So clearly there are times where the U.S. and Democrats in particular, Biden in particular, because he was Obama's vice president, have defied Israeli demands. So you've proven that you can do it. Do it in this instance, and they just they refused. They refused to do that.
Fucking solution, bro. It was not to permanently ethnically cleanse.
Bring about a two-state solution by giving billions of dollars in weaponry to Israel to exterminate.
I don't know how these things are mutually exclusive. You seem to think that these things are mutually exclusive.
That's why you had people calling for arms embargoes, because it's like, well, we're demanding that you at least make the arms transfers conditional, but you don't really even seem to be doing that or attaching very, very few conditions. And I'd hardly count comply with international law. That's not a condition. That's a given. That should obviously be an assumption. That's not a string attached. So when you're saying, it's like it's like being in an escape car, handing somebody, your friend who says, if you give me a gun, I'm going to rob the bank. And you hand them the gun and you say, please don't rob the bank. And they do it anyway. Well, you kind of knew that was going to happen. If you really don't want them to rob the bank.
I told them not to.
Yeah, I gave them the gun, but I told them not to do it. And that was effectively how I felt like what Biden was doing. I'm like, you're passing the bank robber the gun and you're saying, please don't, or please don't do it that way. When you should be saying, if you're going to do that, you're not getting the gun.
Yeah. Or if you keep robbing banks, I'm going to stop giving you.
Yeah.
For each new bank that you're robbing.
Exclusive from trying to promote a two-state solution, wiping out half the population.
Let me ask you this: why do you
also the idea, the two states? It's a meme. We were even before October 7th. If Biden having that position meant fuck all, because they were not close to they were not on the verge of having statehood or anything like that. They were so far from it, so that wouldn't have been enough in that respect. And now we're talking about it being meaningful in the context of where you can't even get Biden to call for a ceasefire. Like a permanent ceasefire, permanent ceasefire.
There's no cost to an American president saying I want a two-state solution, because who even calls for one-state solutions is, at this point, it's basically just like mostly online lefties. Like, I don't think there's a significant contingent of people that he would be like alienating a voting base from saying a two-state solution. So it's not like a It's not like a meaningful stance, I think, in any regard. It's not.
The other thing is that if it's going to be set along with using the international framework to some extent, it won't be the correct application of it, but to some extent that's going to guide it. All of the ICJ rulings, the UN, the precedents, it's all along a two-state solution. there is practically nothing in international law with respect to this conflict that talks about a one state. The other thing to contend with, though, is that there is one state. There is one state.
Yeah.
You're assuming that they're going to end that military occupation. They're never ending that occupation, and they're never ending they don't want to end that blockade. So in light of that, if you're not using that as the launching point, but yeah, it's a completely safe thing to say. Everybody wants a two-state. The question is, what is that two-state going to look like?
Why did the prospect, like a serious prospect of Israel permanently displacing Palestinians in Gaza, how come that happened only when Trump came in office? Why did
it didn't. It happened.
Yes, it did. Why are you lying about this?
Wait, what? Hold on, I have to go back and missed it.
Israel permanently displacing Palestinians in Gaza. How come that happened only when Trump came in office?
No, that didn't only happen.
Wait, what?
That didn't. The prospect of people in Gaza being ethnically cleansed is something that only came to fruition once Trump only became a serious possibility, and now eventual reality once Trump was elected. But that's not true. They had earmarked in a bill back in 2023 money to attempt to push the Palestinians into Egypt and I think Jordan, and then President Sisi of Egypt is like, we're not doing that. These Arab states, if they want to take them in, they would have taken them in decades ago. They don't want to take in the Palestinians because they don't want to absorb them. They don't want to integrate them. And it's too much destabilization to have all of these hundreds of thousands of displaced people. They were trying to put money towards facilitating that, which would be facilitating the ethnic cleansing because you were not going to get Israel to agree to let them return. So that plan was hatched under Biden. Once Egypt and Jordan said, no, that's not happening, then they backed off, and it was towards AIDS. But Biden made overtures and movements towards that. So yes, he was also willing to facilitate the ethnic cleansing.
It didn't. It happened.
Yes, it did. Why are you lying about this?
Behind the times. No, it happened immediately.
No, it did not, bro. No, it did not.
No.
The Biden administration.
There were plans released. There were plans leaked immediately. The intention was to push the Palestinians into the Sinai. Okay, that was the plan.
That was never meant to be a permanent solution. That was meant to evacuate civilians from a bloody conflict.
Okay.
Wait, to the sign. Wait, what? What he's saying doesn't make any sense.
What Hutch is saying?
No, yeah, what Hutch is saying.
Yeah.
Move them to the Sinai temporarily so that you can get them out of harm's way. That's insane.
Then why are they? Why were they also talking about moving Palestinians out of the West Bank?
Yeah,
I cannot believe people actually think that the forcible evacuation was anything other than ethnic cleansing. This is trying to be framed as a humanitarian thing. It's not a humanitarian thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's like if Russia's
Palestinians they won't get ethnically cleansed if we just move them all out of that area
for safety. Which I agree. It's like I would
that's the definition of ethnic cleansing.
If the only I hate to say it, but these are the choices that you're faced with. It's either genocide, mass genocide and slaughter, or ethnically cleanse and let them and forcibly transfer them to another country. I would rather have them forcibly transferred and alive than genocided, obviously. But I'm not going to pretend that like the ethnic cleansing is the humanitarian gesture. It's the lesser of two evils.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even necessarily that because right, so there's the conservatives who are saying like, well, we should end the war in Ukraine. However, because lots of Ukrainians are dying, but the Ukrainians are saying, hey, we're fighting for our nation. We would rather die than just like be taken over by Russia without a fight. And the Palestinians are saying like, yeah, we're willing to die to try to keep our homeland. It's not really up to anybody else to make that choice for them as kind of like this would be better for you. Like that's, I don't think it's reasonable to impose your value system on someone else in that particular
right. You present the option, but if they don't do it, Israel doesn't get to assume anybody who remains terrorist, and therefore it's a free fire zone, and we can just do whatever, which is obviously what would happen to any Palestinians that remain.
It'd be better for you if you just, get into the cage and get carted off somewhere.
Yeah, and if you don't,
things would go a lot better for you if you stop resisting.
The Biden administration never proposed
their villages in the Palestinians who fled for their lives between 47 and 49. They didn't leave permanently. It wasn't meant to be permanently, but they were never allowed back.
It's valid to have
Every Palestinian knows.
It's valid
Every Palestinian knows if you leave, you're not coming back. Okay? Everyone knows that. And the Egyptians know that too. That's why the Egyptians would not allow the Palestinians into the Sinai, because they weren't going back into Palestine, into Gaza. That wasn't going to happen.
You don't need to, first of all,
concentration camp in the Sinai.
First of all, you don't need to twist my arm to criticize Joe Biden with respect to like how he handled this conflict. But when you make specific claims like Biden wanted to permanently ethnically cleanse Gaza, you're just, in this case, I don't think you're lying.
He didn't say that. Disinfo didn't say that Biden wanted to ethnically cleanse. I don't think he said that at all.
I think that he was saying, I actually do get the impression that is what he's saying, because he's saying that Biden is willing to facilitate, is that Biden's first choice? No, but he's willing to facilitate it for Israeli interests.
He definitely does not positively want that, but is he willing to
materially do it? Isn't
materially support
that? Isn't that a distinction without a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, it's a really pedantic point that
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because to me, it's like, if you were really opposed to that, you would not even be entertaining it as a possibility.
Sure. Like, it matters as much as you want it to matter. Like, I don't think Biden is like, fuck yeah, we got to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Let's do this.
No, I know the official Israeli U.S. position is they don't want that. They said as much. But if you were starting to entertain putting money towards that, if you were really seriously weighing that as an option and saying, okay, well, what would this look like? Then.
Wait, okay, I was confused.
Because like now I'll use your words back at you. You said intentions matter less than actions.
Working on a bill for that, or Israel? The U.S. was working on it. Yeah,
this was in 2023.
Oh shit!
And then they abandoned it. And then once they abandoned it, once Egypt and Jordan said no, which is what Disinfo just said. So I do think that, like you said earlier, you focus on outcome over intent. I need to
see more about that bill and like who was involved and stuff. But that implies whoever was involved in that is.
I mean, Democrats pushed back, but the pushback was in the framing of, this is not the best humanitarian thing to do for Palestinians, and please protect them. It was not in this. It was not as aggressive as stop trying to ethnically cleanse them.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So
I think you're woefully misinformed. I don't think you have any idea like what those negotiations look like.
Wiping out,
calling you misinformed.
Gaza, making it unlivable. You've taken out the schools, the universities, the water reservoirs, the hospitals, the homes. Okay, it's filled with unexploded ordnance. Nobody can live there. It's a wasteland. You know,
that's barbaric.
Like 6
I agree with you.
Explosives on this area smaller than Hiroshima. That happened under Biden. So how can you say when
Bro, I just told you I agree. Bro, I just told you I agree with you. Why are you moralizing?
Okay, like the legislative response to this. In response to these concerns, Representative Ayanna Pressley and Jamie Raskin led a group of over 60 lawmakers in urging the State Department to affirm the U.S. opposition to the forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. They emphasized the importance of ensuring that Palestinians who wish to remain in Gaza are allowed to do so, and sought clarifications on the administration's funding request to prevent any misinterpretation that supported forcible transfers. So they never, of course, they're not explicitly endorsing it, but if you're allocating money, if you're having talks with Egypt and Jordan, if you're trying to put this pressure on them to do it, you are trying to facilitate ethnic cleansing, and they were just lucky that Democrats are so pro-Israel that it's like the demand is not quit facilitating this, it's please don't do it that way, you know? Which I think is why more people didn't realize that.
Yeah, God, that's terrible. Like non-forced transfers, A, is still ethnic cleansing, and B, creates the impression that whoever is staying is, like a terrorist or whatever. It's like, oh, well, if they, they're like a reasonable person if they're willing to just, leave their home and whatever and just go somewhere else. If the people who are deciding to stay behind, those are, unreasonable people. Those are maybe terrorists. Like it creates that impression in addition to being literally ethnic cleansing, even if you're doing that in like a voluntary way or whatever, you're putting money toward moving people away rather than like giving them aid to be able to live there.
Yeah, well, they tried to frame it as aid. They tried to frame it as Palestinian migration to Jordan or Egypt. And that's and then there was this is from a website. So this was October 30th, 2023. The United States should oppose any Israeli actions that could result in the forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, says Democracy for the Arab World Now, or DAWN. This is an organization. The group urged Congress to reject a supplementary funding bill that proposes funding humanitarian aid to Palestinians who have been displaced from Gaza to neighboring countries. Israeli actions, statements, and policy directives, including a leaked policy document drafted by the Israeli Intelligence Ministry that recommends the permanent forced transfer of Palestinians in Gaza to Sinai, indicate that Israel is actively considering forcibly displacing Palestinians in Gaza to third countries. On October 20th, 2023, the White House sent a request to Congress for supplemental funding for the current fiscal year, which, among other things, includes logistical infrastructure and other material support to make possible housing displaced Palestinians from Gaza to neighboring countries. The section of the request states, these resources would support displaced and conflict-affected civilians, including Palestinian refugees in Gaza and the West Bank, and to address potential needs of Gazans fleeing to neighboring countries. This would include food and non-food items, healthcare, emergency shelter support, water and sanitation assistance, and emergency protection. This would also include potential critical humanitarian infrastructure costs needed for the refugee population to provide access to basic life-sustaining support. This crisis could well result in displacement across the border and higher regional humanitarian needs, and funding may be used to meet evolving programming requirements outside of Gaza. And then they're saying that you're effectively facilitating funding or rewarding the forced transfer of Palestinians by supporting Israeli efforts to forcibly transfer them to Egypt or Jordan. You would be complicit in war crimes at that point.
And it's also it's like moving kind of expectations where you're also saying, oh, if Israel bombs your apartment building to the ground into rubble that you live in, and then you leave as a result, that's voluntary. That's not forced. If they bomb the school that your kid goes to, the hospital that you go to, the building that you live in,
the refugee camp you're at,
voluntary. Then if you leave, right, that's not forced.
Right now. When he rushed, no. There's a point here. There's a logical point.
Okay, arrive at the point.
Weaponry to wipe out Gaza. How do you expect that after that the Palestinians would be able to stay there?
Rebuild.
Of course, that's the critical component of the ethnic cleansing.
Rebuild. You rebuild.
Okay. There have been estimates that it would literally take 200 years just to clear the rubble. If you had tried to do it and exclusively allow Palestinians to use the civic infrastructure, I'll try to find it. Hold on.
That's what happens.
Rebuild.
What do you think happens now?
You think the
what do you think? Why are you scoffing at that? Why are you scoffing? Hold on. Answer this question. Why are you scoffing at that? The idea of rebuilding.
Also, it's funny the idea that we're talking about rebuilding when we could just stop bombing in the first place, instead of, I mean, isn't it over 80 to 90% of structures have already been leveled? Maybe the better thing to do, instead of promising that we would rebuild it, is just not level it in the first place.
Well, we're not promising to rebuild it. We're saying maybe they should rebuild it somehow.
Yeah.
With no aid
in Israel,
no food even.
Intended to rebuild Gaza. They were going to wipe the whole.
What did you think? What did you think their plan was? Just to leave it rebel forever?
We cleanse the Palestinians, obviously.
Are you saying that Biden's plan was to leave? Are you saying that Biden's plan was to leave Gaza in rubble forever?
I don't think he gave a shit what happened.
Now you're shifting the goalpost because what you said is fucking ridiculous.
I haven't shifted any.
Yeah, of course, because you didn't want to answer that question because it's fucking ridiculous.
Your question, leave it in rubble forever. I don't know. In the year 2200,
you don't know. You don't know.
Biden will be dead. Will they rebuild Gaza? I don't know. I'm talking about the fact that if you make the whole Gaza Strip, if you wipe it out and it's uninhabitable, then it necessarily follows that the people are going to have to leave to somewhere where they can actually live.
Or you could rebuild, right? I mean, I feel like that would be a better option.
Take decades to rebuild.
Yes.
Decades.
Yes.
What are the Palestinians in Gaza supposed to do?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, but they would have to set up some kind of.
Who knows? Their problem, right? So this is Al Jazeera. Clearing Gaza rubble could take 15 years, UN agency says. The war debris contains unexploded ordnance, harmful substances, and bodies, according to a UN report. This was 2024. 15 years in 2024. July 2024. So a year later, what do we think that number is at? It's not only at 15. And this is just talking about clearing rubble. We're not even talking about building at that point.
They would have to work out the logistics. I don't know the answer to that question. But of course they're going to have to rebuild in Gaza.
He has a sweetheart. He supported the genocide of Gaza, wiping it out. But he always knew in his heart that the Palestinians would remain in the rubble.
I still don't understand why you're I still don't understand why you're moralizing to me about. Yeah, you are, bro. You're trying to. If you render the territory unlivable, that's it. I have. How many times do I have to tell you? How many times do I have to tell you? I agree with you that Biden, his Gaza policy will be a forever stain on his administration. It's either that or him staying in the race for as long as he did. But those two things are ultimately going to be his legacy, not his signature pieces of legislation. It's going to be his inaction and his enabling of Netanyahu, which is going to stain his legacy forever. And I agree with these criticisms. So why are you moralizing?
Okay, I was like, where did I get the hundreds of numbers? Okay. And the plan so far, they've not talked about easing the blockade. If anything, they want to increase the restrictions on the blockade, which was already punitive. I was actually being conservative when I said that. So this is according to VOA News. The United Nations says it could take more than 350 years to rebuild it if the blockade remains, given the amount of structures that are destroyed. And so this is January of this year. So 2025, the UN this is the UN saying, if the blockade remains, if the occupation remains, which it would, after this, when you factor in how long it takes to clear the rubble and then get to rebuilding, plus the blockade and all of these other impediments and the safety and security and all of that, 350 years. So that's... And I said 200, thinking, I was like, wait, where did I get 200? And it's worse than that.
Like, don't you understand how bad it is for Palestinians? No, you are, though, because you're telling me that I don't care about Palestinian kids. You accuse me of sweeping for Biden. And
when history books record what happened to Gaza, do you think that they're going to record the ethnic cleansing as a separate chapter that begins with Trump? Biden wiping the place out, they would not consider it a part of the ethnic cleansing operation. Is that honestly how you think?
What's your question? Ask the question in a more concise way, please.
The question is, do you think that what Biden did, wiping out Gaza, is going to be considered a part of the ethnic cleansing operation for Gaza? Or do you think it's going to be separated out and the ethnic cleansing only began under Trump? Do you think that's how historians are going to look at this?
No, Biden's hands are dirty. They're bloody. Yeah.
I hate that he won't directly answer that question. Because he said, where do you think historians are going to, what do you think their assessment of this is going to be? And he said, well, they'll say it's dirty. That's not what he was. I feel like he won't answer that question because he knows the historical record is going to reflect that this began under Biden. It was facilitated primarily by Biden, and now Trump has taken that over, and it's escalated.
Yeah, I mean, Trump obviously would have done as bad or worse, but most of what happened since October 7th, that happened under Biden. That's when that occurred.
This is also why it bothered me. Right. I would rather have Biden over Trump in charge of it, as depressing as that sounds. Seriously, it's entirely depressing to say that. But this is what frustrated me the entire time, because I was like, more Democrats they'd be outraged, they would be protesting, they'd be saying it's a genocide, they'd be saying all of these things if Trump had been doing it. But it's only now that they're willing to say something about it because it's Trump doing it. But I'm like, look at what has materially changed.
Yeah.
I mean, the aid, yes. The aid, you can point to the aid and it's like, yes, they're intentionally helping them starve Palestinians.
Yeah.
Yes, he's guilty of ethnic cleansing.
But it was not that Trump revamped the policy. He was continuing the existing policy and making it worse.
Yeah.
He's guilty of enabling, I don't know about ethnic cleansing that we're talking about now. If it happens, is going to happen on Trump's watch. But we didn't see ethnic.
Okay, now they're doing the thing that they criticize Hassan for doing. Because Hassan says, there's a clip of him being like, we actually don't know what Kamala Harris would have been. We have no evidence or reason to believe it would have been better than Trump. I think we do have enough evidence to say it would have been better than Trump because Bibi preferred Trump to Harris. So that settles that debate to me. But now they're turning around and saying, well, we don't know that Biden would have done that. We don't know that he wouldn't have pushed back against it. And they're ignoring all of his policy and saying that they're like, we can't know that for sure. But I think they're hiding behind that.
Extreme crazy one here. Am I the one bending over backward because I can't deal with the facts?
Yes. It's crazy. It's crazy to accuse me of skipping that image of the child. Like, do you seriously not make any space? Let me just say what I have to say. I just want to tone things down a notch. I just want to speak to you like a human being. I want you to treat me like a human being, if you can muster the strength.
Okay.
Do you not have any space in that mind of yours to consider the possibility that I skipped that image because I had TOS concerns? Do you not make any space?
We're on this again. Okay.
Possible?
I'll tell you what. The space I made was when I talked to you on Twitter. And
Don't dodge this question, man. Come on.
No, I'm not. This is directly related. When
Come
I talked to you
on.
on Twitter, I said, okay. You said, come talk to me on your stream. I said, okay. But first, just play that clip of the kid.
I'm not playing anything that's
clip of the
TOS.
kid
This is my job. I'm not going to risk loss of income. You understand that?
Wait, so
It was weeks after the fact.
It doesn't matter.
I don't think that showing that kid would risk it. I'll be honest.
yeah, so
I understand
I
not
feel
doing it impulsively, but now that you can
Yeah,
review
yeah,
the
yeah.
content and see, it's not. There's no way showing a burn victim would do that.
hmm yeah, I feel like he's saying something different now. It's like, oh, then I skipped it, and you're reading into that. But now he's talking about, well, I still
Won't
refuse
show
to
it.
show it, which again, like I don't know enough about this dude to know that, like, to have a model in my mind of what he believes about TOS.
Mhm.
And Twitch do be crazy. Like I you know, so
Yeah.
I don't know that I can say that Hutch definitely believes this thing about TOS with respect to this. But
They could watch
to
it
me,
off
seems
screen.
pretty- yeah, I could watch it off screen and not show his face. That would be something. But I mean, somebody who is disfigured from a thing, but is like basically, healed to the degree that they'll heal, and is giving a speech. It's not
Or speaking to news. I feel like at that point.
Yeah.
And again, the news
they're
will
speaking on the news.
show
Is this
things.
like an interview or?
This is the impression that I got. But I'd have to find the Noah Samson thing. I just find it because YouTube's TOS is different than Twitch. But if it's making it into a YouTube video that Noah Samson had sponsored and probably is monetized, I find it dubious that it could not be shown on Twitch.
It's not violence. It's like the kind of like result of violence, but it's not dead body. It's not like somebody who's currently, not having healed from an injury.
Have you
There's,
ever
like,
seen
fresh injury or
that
something?
Oprah interviewed that woman who had her face literally ripped off by a chimp?
Yeah.
Okay, like that video is on YouTube, and I feel like I could show that on Twitch because she shows her face at some point, and I'm not gonna pretend like. Would I say it's graphic? I mean, they give a graphic warning, but she is permanently disfigured, and that is evident
this is
from
a
her.
person who walks around in public and like that exists. Like this is a person who.
Right.
This is their day-to-day life, right?
Well, she covers her face, but she does show it for the interview because Oprah's like practically moves the thing. It's horrible. But my point is that I feel like it could be shown, so this could probably be shown.
And,
I can't watch.
and it's also it's like I think there's something that you could have an impression if it was like, wow, look at how heavily injured this person is. That's actually not the focus. It's a person who, yes, like was injured by this attack, but they're giving an interview about a situation. Their injury is actually not even the focus of the thing. I think maybe you could see it in a different light if it was like, wow, look at all of these injured children. Maybe I really.
I mean, could I really not even show? I couldn't even show children that are like emaciated from war footage in Gaza on Twitch. Maybe
emaciated. I
Like,
actually genuinely don't know.
not just conflict from like they're outside walking around, like they're in a hospital. I don't know.
I genuinely don't.
And they're not
know.
unclothed or anything. Like clothed children that are clearly underweight. Wouldn't I be able to show that? I don't know.
But
Twitch
somebody
is
who,
weird.
Like somebody who was like in a wheelchair like months after having been injured and like had both of their legs amputated. I feel like that couldn't be TOS. Like, I actually don't know. For somebody who is like currently starving, that might be
Maybe it's too much.
over the line. I don't know.
But somebody
actually about
recovering from an injury, I just don't know.
that. Yeah, I don't think that would.
That
be.
seems surprising to me.
Watch bloody images from Vietnam, bro. You understand
He
this?
was not bleeding. I'm saying he was not bleeding. It's just his face.
Yeah.
That's his face now. Okay.
If I have valid concerns over TOS, I don't want to take any risks that's going to result in me getting a three-day ban or a week ban. Some of us don't have the luxury of getting fucking 24-hour bans at most. Okay.
The more egregious part to me was not the skipping past the kid's face. It was the making excuses for the Israeli terror attack that did that to that child. That's what I had an issue with. And okay, so and whitewashing Biden, he's a genocidaire. Okay, to this need to say, well, Trump's worse. Wag your finger at.
Do you think Trump is worse? Do you think Trump is worse?
I think Trump is worse domestically, for sure.
No. On Gaza. Do you think Trump is worse?
I have no fucking idea. I have no idea.
Yeah,
Oh, but you can ask.
I don't.
30.
I don't like this.
I might understand.
This should be a really easy,
if you're like an undergrad.
Wait, I missed it or whatever. Because now I'm looking at it. This looks.
But
Oh,
this idea.
Okay, you could show this. You could show this. The moments before you probably couldn't because they were showing. It was censored, but it was still. It looked like first response footage. But this, why wouldn't you be able to show this?
No, this is not like. No, this wouldn't be TOS. This is like.
So he's refusing to play this. I think you could easily play this. This is an interview. It's outside of the context of the attack. It's not CCTV footage. It's not, there's no gore or blood or anything like that. This person is healed as well as they probably can.
Healed as much as they, yeah.
So I think it would be fine. So I think the more honest thing is he probably just doesn't want to.
This idea that you can't identify that Trump is worse in Gaza is fucking absurd. That ship.
Absurd. It was wiped out under Biden.
That ship has sailed.
Wiped out under Biden.
That ship has sailed, my friend. The second
would not draw a red line, no matter what.
The second that Donald Trump got up there and proposed annexing Gaza and permanently displacing Palestinians from that region, all of you guys at once should have been like, this is worse.
I think he's
I actually don't agree with this info here with this like take end or tactic or anything. Like this for lefties, it should be like, this should just be a really easy, like, yeah, obviously Trump is worse. Like,
right.
Of course he's worse. In terms of like grand scheme of things, like, I don't know if he's more than like 10 or 20% worse. Like, in terms of actual impact.
John McCain and Mitt Romney are less bad Republicans than Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
But then you can acknowledge that and move on to the point that there is not enough of a difference between those because with respect to this policy, there is way too much overlap and not enough of a distinction. And so, they're both, you could say that they are both conclusively terrible on this issue. Trump is nonetheless worse, but we have to really get into the finer points to make that case for a lot of people on the left.
Yeah.
And
you should be able to, I think for your own, like, even if you feel like in your heart, what Biden did is so bad that I can't speak that Trump is worse because like the thing that happened under Biden is so like horrific and so much destruction that I actually can't say that Trump is worse because what happened under Biden is worse. Then you should be able to at least just strategically, so that people who aren't sure about like where you're coming from, just to build your own credibility, you should be like, yeah, Trump is clearly worse. He changed these policies to be worse when he came into office, where he took away the cap on 2,000-pound bombs. He's obviously cuddly with Netanyahu. He's not pushing back at all. Like, there's obviously some things that are worse. Like that, I feel like even just tactically, that should just be like an easy own. Like, yes, obviously he's worse, but in the grand scheme of things, for the results for Palestinians, Biden is enough bad that it's like existential destruction.
Right.
So it's like,
I think this urge comes from wanting to hold Democrats to the same standards that we hold Republicans to. And not wanting to seem like you are carving out excuses for your preferred party as the lesser evil party, and whitewash or play defense for actions and policies that are way, 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 way too similar. But I think when you're talking to people outside of your bubble, your echo chamber, or like-minded people at the very least, you need to make a more convincing case, and you need to explain this. Or like, what's another way to explain this? Like, I think it feels to lefties like, could you imagine a Republican saying like, you should praise Trump for letting the aid in, and you're like, but he helped them not let aid in for 2 months, and it's like, and he's like, yeah, but he's doing it now, so that's better than nothing, right? So praise him. That's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, it's like there's the thing that's just happening is it's like Republicans are being like, oh, liberals and Democrats love Elon again.
Right.
Like, we don't love him because he's beefing with Trump. That's such a, it tells me so much about your worldview that you see us egging them on. Like, we're hoping that they're gonna pull each other's hair as much as possible, because
as like a genuine pivot.
We hate both of them, and we're happy that they're beefing because they're both bad, and then beefing with each other is better than them both trying to fuck us.
Right.
So it's like, of course we're happy that they're beefing, but it simply doesn't mean that we love Elon. Like, that's an insane way to think about things, but that's clearly how you think about things. It's not a question of, oh, somebody did something that is better or worse objectively, and now we praise them. It's good that a thing that is less bad happened, but we don't now like that person for doing
right. It's not
thing.
sincerely cheering on Elon or wanting him to come over. It's like you're praying for their downfall. To frame that as just support for Elon is so disingenuous, or it's a joke.
Yeah, we're hoping that they lock their horns and tumble off a cliff together. That's what we're hoping. Like, it's
yeah, you must love Elon now, you hypocrite.
Guy now.
That Biden will try and conceal. Biden will lie about it.
I am fine with criticism of Biden, but you suggesting that Biden was
with the humanitarian crisis while he's supplying billions of dollars
I am fine
to massacre these kids. He doesn't speak in an upfront way.
Let me ask you something.
Admits his
let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. Do you think it was a good thing that humanitarian aid got into Gaza during that conflict?
It barely got in. It wasn't enough.
It's a separate discussion, and I agree with you.
You have to say yes. You have to say yes.
Do you think that the aid that went into the country during that conflict was essential for Palestinian survival?
Yep.
For those people to survive.
Don't
dance around. Don't dance around the question. Please just ask the question.
There's a fundamental problem with the question, and the fundamental problem is the United States created the problem. You can't pat yourself on the back for insufficiently.
Whatever. We can unpack that. We can unpack that. Whatever. But I want to focus on
humanitarian crisis.
Just answer the question. Just answer that question. Just answer that question.
It's an absurd question. It's like saying
it's a perfectly reasonable
question. Is it a good thing?
You don't want to answer the question because
it's not absurd. You should just answer yes, and then just move on to your point and say it's not enough. His refusal to acknowledge this very, very small point is pig-headedness on his part.
You know
it's like the analogy you should bring is it's like if you shoot somebody and then put some pressure on the wound for a while and then leave. Like, is it good that you put pressure on the wound? It's like in a vacuum, that thing is like a good thing. It gets in this context, it gets so complicated and so 47D chess, because it's like if Israel lets in a little bit of aid, perhaps that gives a lot of people the impression that things are not as bad as they are, and it allows worse things to continue. And so, like, a good thing could very, very directly lead to a bad thing. And then it's like, well, the thing that happened was good, but it directly led to something that was bad, which is bad. So the good thing is bad. Like, it depends on like what time scale and what kind of causal chain we're looking at.
If I bring a homeless child inside and then start beating them, which is a better situation.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're not on the street being beaten up. I'm beating them with and then putting antiseptic stuff on the wound. Like,
I feed them. I give them medical care after I physically abuse them, but I'm still helping them.
Yeah,
it undermines your premise. That's why you don't want to answer the question.
Listen, every time the Germans gave the Jews in the concentration camps some bread to eat, were they being kind?
But it's a Malcolm X quote about stabbing someone with a 9-inch knife and then pulling it out 6 inches.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you pulled it out 6 inches, I guess.
Answer that question.
But I think he should engage with it head on and say, yes, it's good, but it's in the context of things that were overall preventable, so it really is still deficient.
Would you say
and even more so, it's like the impression that is created by doing a tiny bit of good could lead to more harm. Like then like, let's say no aid got in, maybe there's a larger response of the world, which again, like, it doesn't mean that you should do that. Like, you shouldn't ever instrumentalize and be like I don't agree with a kind of accelerationist, like an accelerationist policy, but the underlying principles that generate accelerationism are also just literally obviously true. Like, they're inarguable.
Right, like that's the Trump being in office motivates people to be more civically active, demand more and accountability from elected leaders. That is just true. Because with Democrats,
but it's also bad that he's in office.
Right.
This is a paradox of our time. It's a paradox, I guess. I don't know. That's how you look at it.
Maybe perhaps a slight difference between the Holocaust and what has happened in Gaza over the last year.
The Holocaust.
Year and a
okay,
half.
what just happened? What just happened? Hold on.
Camps, some bread to eat. Were they being kind?
Oh,
Answer
okay.
that question.
He said were Nazi soldiers giving Jews confined to like the Warsaw Ghetto or concentration camps being kind by giving them food.
Yeah, which I think is like, I don't know.
Would you rather they not have food? Would you rather they not have food?
Like, I think if you do want to generate these principles, I think it's okay to use really extreme hypotheticals, which in this case is not so extreme.
I mean, I just never thought that I would be asked by fellow leftist liberals and Democrats to actually pat somebody on the back for allowing in food. That seems like we're now rewarding the bare. I'm being asked. I'm being prompted to reward the bare minimum, and they're saying yes, you are. And it's like, okay, I will agree to you. Yes, it's better than nothing, but I'll be honest, I'm not moved or inspired by that to praise it enthusiastically. No, I would really be virtue signaling to say that I was.
Yeah, it's good and it's better than nothing, and it also might be worse than nothing. Is like that's a logically correct statement that it's like you have to grapple with.
Would you say that there is maybe perhaps a slight difference between the Holocaust and what has happened in Gaza over the last year?
There's a Holocaust
last year and a half.
in Gaza right now.
Would you say that these two things are maybe slightly different?
There's a Holocaust in Gaza taking place right now. I'm watching children being massacred by the hundreds every single day for a year and a half.
Would you say that there is a slight difference between the Holocaust and what's happening right now?
Hospital beds.
I mean,
Do you not want to concede that point?
1,000-pound bombs on tents full of women and children.
Do you not want to concede the point here?
They take the patients and the doctors, they take them to torture camps and starve and beat
So it's
and
1-to-1?
them to death.
So it's 1-to-1? You're saying
to call that?
So it's 1-to-1? You think what's happening over
that's not what an analogy is for. Right? Hutch is not owning like. It's like, hey, you said that allowing aid in is good. I'm asking you a hypothetical to derive that like more general question. And as an analogy, I think it holds. It doesn't have to be the same. That's part of an analogy is you're trying to extract a general rule. And it's like you're saying, well, this good thing happened, and I have to see that it's good. And I'm saying, well, a good thing happened when people in like death camps were given bread. Like, would you rather they don't have bread? It's like that point is the same. And also when it comes to like making comparisons between the Holocaust and what's happening in Gaza, I feel like the main way that people should be talking about this is it's like, look, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't want to necessarily make that comparison, but lots and lots of IDF soldiers are saying that they feel that way. They're saying that they, as Jews, feel disgusted with what they feel like they're Nazis.
Right.
The things that they're doing in Gaza, that's how they feel. And I feel like we ought to listen to that. I don't like it's not
the
my
other
place
thing is that
necessarily
like
to make that comparison, but
let's
that's
be
what they're
real.
saying.
World War II, Nazism, it's the rubric for international atrocities. You can say it shouldn't be that way. You can say that we don't need to invoke, is it Godwin's Law? We were talking about Hitler and stuff like that, making comparisons to make the comparison. And I would not truly fight somebody for doing it, but I think there are better and more apt analogies to make because it immediately leads to this. And I would love to avoid this because obviously the Holocaust was worse. We're talking about industrial extermination, like pan-nation extermination that like transcended borders and was pure ideology.
There was no plausible deniability, obviously, like this. Far beyond that. But we're hoping to not get there is, again, never again means we stop it before it happens.
That's and the whole point is like, so international law, the Geneva Conventions were reformed and improved after the Nazi Holocaust. So we should be seeking to take note of that and not replicate the terror that occurred instead of really asking like, is this analogy completely fair or something like that? Or like, I also don't like, if I said like, this is if Biden lied about something, like he said the 40 beheaded babies thing. He said, I literally saw that with my eyes, and he didn't. He didn't. The White House clarified that he did not, and he kept repeating that. If I say that is literally a North Korean, like Kim Jong-un level lie, and they're like, oh, so now Biden is like Kim Jong-un. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying as far as this, the lie that's being told here is something I would expect from someone like that. But I'm not saying, I'm not comparing them. Obviously, Biden's not as bad as Kim Jong-un.
It doesn't make any sense.
What do you mean it's not?
One means
well, what word would you like me to
whatsoever?
What word would you like me to use then?
Any distinction. 1-to-1 means if there's any distinction whatsoever, then you can't.
The other thing is that if we're going to close off the possibility of drawing analogies and comparing and contrasting history, that's the whole point of history, is to be able to look at past historical events, what's happening now.
Never 1-to-1.
Right. It's never going to be 1-to-1.
History. It's like a South African apartheid is never going to be identical to Israeli apartheid because they're different countries in different times. Like that's not why you look at history.
But to overall just say like it's not comparable without actually saying here are the distinctions that render that analogy unhelpful. If you just say no, you can't compare it because it was worse or whatever, I really do feel like that's thought terminating and trying to avoid engaging with it. When it's like, well, this is what we have, and you have to keep in mind that modern atrocities now in 2025 and 2023 are going to look different than what was possible when Dresden was bombed and nukes were being dropped and no one was getting in trouble.
Can't compare them.
I'm asking you if you think that these two events are in reality actually comparable. Or as horrible as what's happening in Gaza right now.
What does that mean?
You know that clip of that girl who was giving the speech at a town hall or something, and she's like, "Do not compare other genocides to this one." That's what you sound like.
You don't think
there was a young Israeli girl, as far as I know, she might have been just a young Jewish girl who was speaking at some sort of international conference, and she said she was speaking in favor of Israel, and she was saying, "How dare you compare this genocide to others?" But she meant to say this war to genocides.
I mean, you don't think it's a worthwhile thing to explore? Because you made the claim. You're saying that basically what's happening in Gaza right now is the same thing as the Holocaust.
No, I said it is a Holocaust.
Yeah, so
he so didn't do that. It's insane how much he didn't do that.
Fascism now is going to look different from when it did in the 30s and 40s. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is like people getting mad at calling Trump a fascist. It's like, you want to see what a real fascist looks like? Go look up Stalin. Go look up Hitler. And it's like, again, it's modern fascism.
Literally cannot be a fascist because he's using Jews as a shield to lock up Muslims and
a defining characteristic of fascism typically includes anti-Semitism. Like you're trying to obfuscate the point to
we're not doing this one thing, so it's okay.
Holocaust. A Holocaust is a mass killing, usually by fire.
Can you just answer the question though? Like, do you think that it was a good thing that aid got into the country?
Do you think it was kind?
Why won't you answer that question? Why won't you answer that question? Why won't you answer that question? Why won't you answer that question?
I feel like Hutch has been evasive of his questions because he wouldn't answer the one about the historians.
Yeah,
but now
just a bad conversation where they're at a communication level. I don't know. This is why, because me having watched this whole thing, I can't really come to any conclusions about where anybody's coming from. I haven't really gained that much more information compared to a careful, good faith cross-examination, whatever, where you can get people on the record, which is great because it's you can get people on the record and then you see them talk about something later and they're like, wait, you told me this, but now you're saying this on stream. And